So an absolutely enormous Warhammer 40K released today. It looks like the Leagues of Votann are materialising in full, every kit in their range coming out, so let's take a look at the releases and their prices. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, and it's good news this week for those of you who are trying to get a kin host of the Leagues of Votann off the ground. We've had the launch box, so there's been a fair few of the Hearthkin Warriors and the Hernkin Pioneers in circulation, but the vast majority of their range, despite hearing so much about them, has been unable to buy until now. In this video, I thought we'd take a look at each one of the boxes that are going to be coming out for the new Space Dwarves, talk about their prices, and any interesting features of the kits that have been noticed up until now. So this week's Dwarven releases really are quite big ones. It seems that literally everything for the Leagues of Votann is going up for pre-order on the 29th of October. There's no split release between multiple weeks, the Codex is available separately now, and the Combat Patrol box will be here, not following along later like it does for some armies. It'll be interesting to see how the Votann fare once they do hit the tabletop in full force. We've only really been seeing people experimenting with them on Tabletop Simulator or some Proxim models in events, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how they get on, despite their nerfs with the judgment tokens being toned down and lots of points increases. If we go through Games Workshop's releases one by one, first up we've got the Combat Patrol box set. We did see that leaked in the Codex. That'll be the £90, $150 or €120 that it is normally. And in that set you get a Carl that you can also build as Uthar the Destined, 10 Hearthkin Warriors, 5 of the Chthonian Berserks, and 3 of the Hernkin Pioneers. To me it does look like a really quite solid starter box, and does look like it'll offer at least a reasonable discount on the contents inside. Maybe out of the Combat Patrol box set's just a slight bit on the lower side for Games Workshop, maybe in the upper 20%. The Hearthkin Warriors and the Hernkin Pioneers look like units that you'd have in just about every single force, as does the Carl to hand out the Judgment tokens. The Chthonian Berserks do seem pretty handy as well, they do still have massive damage, but I feel like they might be a unit that you need to get a transport for, so it might be worth picking this up hand in hand with something like a Sagittor perhaps for them. Overall though, looks like a pretty reasonable box for someone starting the faction. Quite a lot of overlap though if you did already pick up the launch box. Next up we've got Codex Leagues of Votann. They're £32.50, €42.50 or $55 these days, and that's for the non-limited edition version. I'm almost kind of surprised that they're selling a limited edition one separately, seeing as there were absolutely tons of them released in the launch box and they're going really cheaply on eBay at the moment if you wanted to pick one up. It is definitely in a weird place that by the time the Codex goes on general release, there's already been some pretty hefty day one errata, points nerfs, and the Judgment token revision. At least with the hefty nerfs that the faction got, at least hopefully they shouldn't attract quite as much ire when you try and take them to games. Hopefully after those changes they will add up to being a fairly balanced army on the tabletops of 40k. My guess at the moment is that they might add up to being slightly on the lower side of middle for 40k. Obviously though we'll have to wait and see until people get to play them in earnest. As I mentioned, might well be worth checking eBay where you are if you do want to pick up the Codex. They are going quite cheaply from the launch box. Next up we've got the standard Leagues of Votann troops. The Hearthkin Warriors are £32.50, $55 or €42.50. These are actually slightly cheaper than I would have guessed. I would have expected them to be something in line with the Sisters of Battle Sister Squad, and that's a little bit more. Kind of good to see that the standard troops box is a little bit more affordable than I might have expected from Games Workshop. They have also already been heavily discounted as well, already in the launch box, so again there might be eBay offerings, plus in the Combat Patrol box set. Overall they seem like a really fun and flexible kit though, plenty of different options including a whole bunch of special weapons and unit upgrades. Seem like a solid core to build a Space Dwarf army around. Next up we've got the cybernetically augmented Chthonian Berserks with their great big plasma axes or concussion mauls. These guys are £35, $60 or €45 for 5 of them. It does appear that you do have the option to either build the Mole Grenade Launcher or just field the last Berserk as another melee bearing one. From the way that Games Workshop teased them, a lot of people were wondering whether you'd get the Mole Grenade Launcher separately. Overall, despite their increased price, they still seem to be usable in-game. Plenty of people are taking them in competitive lists still. Often they might need transports or something to get them close though a bit more reliably, as they are quite slow and relatively fragile outside of Immer conglomerates. From this teaser picture of them, they also look like there's a couple of spare bases on there with some little rock plumes or something. I must admit I'm a bit unsure as to what they're supposed to represent. I don't think there's anything from their core rules that would be needed for that. I don't know if that's for Crusade or something different. Feel free to enlighten us all down in the comments if you happen to know. Next up we've got the big bad exosuited Brokir Thunderkin. £32.50, €42 or $55. I would say a little bit on the pricey side for just a squad of 3 models. It is kind of in line with elite units like Primaris Blade Guard though, so perhaps wasn't exactly unexpected. They do have a bit of flexibility with 3 different weapon options that you can choose to field them with. The conversion beamers look the most interesting to me. I did feel that they might have been a unit that maybe didn't necessarily need a points increase when all the rest went up though. I kind of feel that they're in the awkward position of being a backfield fire support unit that don't actually have the most enormous damage output in the world, though perhaps if you're playing Ymir and willing to make heavy use of the core burst of fire pattern stratagem, then there might be enough mortal wounds in those beam weapons to be worth it. Next up we've got the Einhir Hearthguard, £35, $60 or €45. The exo-armoured dwarves are kind of akin to other factions' Terminators, and they are very slightly cheaper than those at about £1 less, but not really significantly different price-wise. These are the guys who received perhaps the biggest and most unexpected increase in the points in the Codex. I would have expected them to go to something like 40 points each, but they went all the way up to 45. And I believe that actually weirdly adds up to them being the single best points per dollar models in the Codex now. If you do want to get a lot of points of Votann on the table for relatively cheap, then these guys might be one of your best bets. Despite the points increase, it still seems that they're being used quite a bit in competitive lists. Having a chunky unit, giving them full rerolls from something, and teleporting them off for a Vulcanite strike seems pretty reasonable. You're almost guaranteed to do a whole bunch of mortal wounds, never mind the regular damage, and then hopefully having a big and chunky threatening unit somewhere annoying for the opponent is enough to make up the rest of their value. For 45 points though, they are really quite expensive for 2 wound models, even if they do have some nice protection. Next up we've got the Hernkin Pioneers, £37.50, $60 or €50. They're in line with Primaris Outriders and some of Games Workshop's other more recent bike releases. I think the Hovertrike look has divided opinions a bit for these ones. I think a fair few people might have preferred to see them with wheels. I feel out of the 3 of them, the best looking one is the one with the rotary cannon on the back, which does seem to be a pretty efficient choice in game as well. On the table, they seem to be a unit that is going to be in just about every single Votann list. Fairly fast and reasonable firepower with OBSEC, definitely a helpful unit for a relatively slow faction as it goes in my opinion. Moving on, we've got the Sagittor, which to be honest perhaps might be one of the best good news stories from a pricing perspective. Over the past few years I really have felt that Games Workshop tends to charge a lot more than you might expect for their basic transports. Say for example like the Space Marine Impulsor or the Sisters of Battle Immolator, both of those go for £47.50. And honestly, I was expecting the Sagittor to be in line with those. Instead, though, it's quite a bit cheaper, £37.50, $60 or €50, far cheaper than those pretty expensive transport options for the Sisters or the Marines. I feel like this is a lot more in line with what you might expect for a slightly cheaper transport vehicle. I'm a bit uncertain as to exactly why the Sagittor costs less than those ones. I don't know whether or not it's just that the kits are maybe a little bit smaller than them, or perhaps because there's a bit of an incentive to buy 2 of them to transport, say, a unit like a 10-man unit of Hearthkin. For whatever the reason, this one isn't quite as brutally expensive as I was expecting. Always nice to see prices from Games Workshop going the right way, even if in general Warhammer is reasonably expensive overall. Another one that I think a lot of people were keen to see the pricing on was the Hecaton Land Fortress. The big bad chunky tank of the Leagues of Votann Codex is £65, $110 or €85. Again, this one doesn't really seem to be too much price creep here. It's the same price as the Repulsor Executioner, and is actually slightly less than the Space Marine Kratos tank that came out recently for Horus Heresy, which again feels to be a vehicle in a similar sort of weight range. It's also cheaper than the Orc Kill Rig as well, which costs far less points as well. So overall I'd say it's not the worst price point for the Land Fortress. Knowing Games Workshop, it certainly could have been worse than this. I feel like out of the altered rules in the Codex, this guy's maybe suffered some of the most. On the initial drop for the rules, it did look like this Land Fortress was perhaps the single best vehicle in all of 40k, which was pretty ridiculous. Easy access to that scary railgun that does splash damage and deletes vehicles or squads almost no questions asked. But between a hefty points bump and the Judgment Token nerf, it's looking a lot more in line with other things, even if both the railgun and the conversion beamer are both looking pretty scary still. It is still possible to do the automatic splash damage with Uthar plus the Hunter's Mark stratagem, so if you invest in it, can still be a unit that pretty much deletes most things in the game. But the biggest difference is that locks you to just one league now, and also that costs you 460 points rather than far less as it would have before. Still seems to be a very usable tank for the army though. Lastly, for the models, we have the Votann characters, First up, the Carl/Uthar kit is £24, $38 or €31.50. That one's pretty much in line with recent character releases. I do feel that Games Workshop charges quite a lot for their individual character sculpts compared with, say, their squads and things. Another option for getting these guys a little bit cheaper might be from the Combat Patrol or the Launch Box. Again, it might well be worth a look on eBay. Otherwise, we've got the Vehicle Buffing Brockir Ironmaster, £30, €40 or $50, the same as a Space Marine Bike Chaplain, and to be honest, that would have been where I would have guessed that this guy would sit in terms of pricing. Quite a cool little, essentially, Votann Tech Marine with a retinue of Servitor Cogs, plus an Ironkin assistant. If you are running a Land Fortress or two, he doesn't seem like a bad investment, makes it hit better, gives you big repairs, and shields it from incoming damage. Seems like a really valuable HQ even after the nerfs. The Grimnir is the faction's Psyker. He's £27.50, €35 or $45, a little bit more expensive than, say, the equivalent for the Chaos Space Marines in the Dark Apostle. He'd be a fairly similar character plus 2 attendants, so it might have been nice to see this guy just be a little bit cheaper. Still though, quite a fun model overall, with his levitating rocks and attendant corvs. Again, certainly a very good value HQ for the faction. He can sit there rustling up command points all game, and Votann do have an awful lot of very strong stratagems to spend them on. The Ironhair Champion's already out and about a fair bit, seeing as he came in the launch box. Again, eBay might be another option. He's the same as the Carl, £24, $38 or €31.50, again in line with recent character releases, and basically like all of the Votann HQs, absolutely immense value. That Exactor Concussion Maul is absolutely brutal. If he gets just a little bit lucky, then he can be doing absolutely mass mortal wounds. Finally, we've got the Votann dice and data cards. The dice would be £20 or €25. I think that will be somewhere around $32. I'm a little bit unsure about that one. Compared with some of the other faction dice, they are quite interesting looking. It looks like they're clear with the Votann symbol on the 6. I do generally feel that Games Workshop's dice are a little bit on the overpriced side, though a lot of people do pick them up. I'd say as custom faction dice go, these ones do look very nice though. Finally, we've got the data cards at £17, €22 or $29. Handy enough for the stratagems and the psychic powers and things. Again, I'd bear in mind that these guys came in the launch box, so again might be going on eBay cheaper than they are here. Overall, it's quite nice to see the entire faction's range dropping all at once, and not having half of it come out and then weirdly have to wait for another few months for more of it to drop. Looks like it might be an expensive weekend if you did want to be getting a Leagues of Votann army together. Overall, I'd say that prices wise maybe aren't absolutely terrible compared with what they could be. Broadly in line with what you'd expect for other armies in 40k. A few things are maybe a little bit less than I might have guessed, things like the Hearthkin Warriors and Sagittor in particular. While the points nerfs might have been a power debuff for the Leagues of Votann as well, it does at least have the positive side effects of not needing as many of them to make a full 2000 point list, so I guess Games Workshop might have saved you some money there. Look forward to hearing your thoughts though. Let me know what you make of the release down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k updates coming. I do tend to post new things just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description if you're interested. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early each week, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.